So thank you for inviting me. I hope you see the screen the way I see it, and probably everything will be okay. So we'll start with the NO, nitric oxide. It has been a long story going on diving. Just to understand how it was just started, this started something like 16 years ago. 16 years ago with a particular paper that has been published by a Norwegian group, showing that after a dive, whatever dive, usual recreational dive, you had a reduction of your endothelial function. What is endothelial function? It's actually endothelium is the inner layer of your blood vessels. And this inner layer of blood vessels is built up by some holes like that, invaginations that are called caveolae. Those caveolae maybe can produce some nitric oxide, but also may also be the origin of some micronuclei. So it depends. We can consider those caveolae as being positively producing something that will keep some flexibility of your arteries, but in another way, they can also keep some micronuclei that are the seeds for the bubbles afterwards. And also, if we are moving those caveolae, maybe we can also get rid of some micronuclei and then reduce our decompression bubbles after. So that's what happens when you have enough NO, nitric oxide. You have flexibility of your endothelium, and of course, you can maybe get rid of some micro bubbles and reduce your bubbles. By the way it is measured, it's quite easy. You take an echography of the artery of your arm, you with a blood pressure cuff, you make an occlusion for 5 minutes, then you release, and after 1 minute more or less, you have a dilation of your artery. And this dilation is directly dependent on the amount of nitric oxide that you have in your bloodstream. What has been published at that time, it was that with rats, a very particular diving was done, 60 meters for 45 minutes, which is a very intense dive for rats, and they were decompressed in a very explosive way. And what happened is that instead of having 80% of the rat that were dying, mortality, they had just 20%. And of course, what happened, what happened to those rats? The funny thing was that Alf Bruback was lacking of one set of rats. So he was killing those rats with this explosive decompression. But he went to his friend just of the lab aside and said, I need one set of rats to finish my work. And this friend said, okay, you can use those rats right there, no problem. But be careful, those are trained rats. Okay, so he decompressed those rats and they survived much better than the others. So he said, so what was the training you were giving them? They were treadmilling, they were running on a treadmill, and we were doing that just to increase nitric oxide. So that was it. Then some other experiments have been done with exercise before diving, and it has been shown that exercise before diving was reducing the number of bubbles with no problem. So again, what was it? Was it nitric oxide or exercise? And actually, with pigs, it has been done in the same way, and was shown that exercise was even better than just nitric oxide infusion. So again, we don't really know what happened. So exercise is two different things. Exercise is a cardiovascular effort, stress, let's say, and a mechanical stress. So we wanted to do some kind of differential analysis between cardiovascular stress and mechanical stress. So to understand this, we put some divers on a vibrating mat, because this is mechanical stress, and we put another bunch of divers in sauna, which is actually not mechanical stress, but cardiovascular stress. And of course, we have been published that paper a few years ago. And of course, nitric oxide was increased in sauna without mechanical exercise, and in vibration, there were mechanical stress, but no cardiovascular stress. But both were reducing bubbles post-dive. So what happened? A few years ago, we also tried to do something to understand what was the best way to reduce bubbles before diving. And we tried to vibrate divers again and give them oxygen in the same time, just to reduce supersaturation before diving. And at the end of the story, we were giving either just vibration, either oxygen and vibration, either oxygen alone. And which one was the best? Actually, amazingly enough, oxygen was reducing something like 20%, oxygen and vibration something like 50%, and vibration alone something like 80, 70%. So it shows that those preconditioning were not directly related to reduce bubbles, not directly related to nitric oxide. So we tried to get something out of that. And then we said, okay, why don't we give them something which is important for nitric oxide and to keep this endothelial function after diving? Chocolate, for instance. I saw somebody in the chat before saying that nothing was better than chocolate. Actually, it's not that wrong, because chocolate, very high level of cocoa, it's quite good. But of course, you need to avoid milk chocolate. But what happened here? So we took the same divers, put them in the sauna. So cardiovascular effort without mechanical effort. Then put them in a vibration mat, mechanical stress without cardiovascular, and giving them chocolate that is actually acting only on nitric oxide. So this has been published in 2017, I think, and it shows very interestingly that if you have sauna before diving, you are keeping your endothelial function working. Remember what we saw in the first slides. And you're also reducing quite well the number of bubbles. So this cardiovascular effort without mechanical effort works on the nitric oxide side and on the reduction of micronuclei. Now, what happened with vibration? Vibration, mechanical stress, nothing to do with nitric oxide. Doesn't work for nitric oxide. There is a reduction, but it works in reducing bubbles. So this acts more on the micronuclei side. Now, what about chocolate? Chocolate gives increases nitric oxide. So very good on that side, which is perfect, but nothing happened to the bubbles. So it shows that it's not so easy to understand how much nitric oxide can count on production of bubbles. Now we found out something interesting a few years ago. It's not very new, but we never imagined that. A lot of people are experiencing some kind of hypertension, for instance, because they are just breathing through the mouth during the night. So those are hypertense people because of lack of nitric oxide. Why? Because you're producing a lot of nitric oxide into your sinuses. And if you breathe by your mouth, actually you will reduce the amount of nitric oxide in your bloodstream. But what happens when you're diving? You're actually breathing by the mouth. So maybe a part of what happened in this reduction of nitric oxide, it's not just done because of the environmental situation, increased PO2 or something, but also because of lacking of natural production of your nitric oxide by your sinuses and your upper nasal system. Here, a very interesting paper published in Thorax showing that actually even TCPO2, transcutaneous partial pressure of oxygen, is increased when you're using your nasal breathing. Why so? Because to release oxygen, the hemoglobin needs nitric oxide. So a reduction in nitric oxide in your hemoglobin will not release so well oxygen in the peripheral part. Now, when you increase the concentration of nitric oxide, you also increase the oxygen release on the peripheral part. If you increase oxygen release, there is something to bet on that you can also probably favor decompression. So that's something that has to be analyzed. So what we did, we just compared the same dive using a full face mask, asking the divers to breathe through the nose. And it was a very shallow dive because we didn't want to interfere with the bubble production. So we asked them to just do the same dive using a full face mask or a half face mask. And as you can see, you have more or less a reduction in this endothelial function by 5% when you have a half face mask. And you don't see such a reduction when you use a full face mask. What happened here, we were comparing the endothelial changes that we knew already in scuba divers and breathal divers, and we were seeing this 5% more or less reduction was seen in the half face mask and not seen in the full face mask. So maybe there is something new right now. Nasal breathing, some kind of naturally breathing underwater, can maybe have other reactions that we never thought of, and some very nice new papers of, this is a free paper that you can find on the internet, and actually is our team, our Dan Europe team, showing that there are some let's say links with the number of bubbles and nitric oxide, and maybe this is due to this oxygen delivery in the periphery. But nevertheless, new data suggests that we need to go a bit further. As I told you, never-ending story. A few ideas in that are on that book. There is another book, the electronic version, and a simplified version showing all those ideas and explanations in a very, let's say, this is a simplified way of explaining it. It's an electronic version as well. So I'm done with it, and my last question will be this one. So what do you think? Is this a sunrise or a sunset? So the beginning of the day or the end of the day? So to be honest, it's almost impossible to guess. The colors are the same. The only thing you can do is just look at your watch, and depending on the hour, you will know if it's a sunset or sunrise. But at the end of the story, it means that for me, this is the end, because it's the sun, the end of the day, because I finished my talk. And for you, I hope it's the sunrise, because maybe you will consider nitric oxide in another way, and maybe some kind of diving in another way. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer some questions.